Hi students, how are you all? I believe you are all keeping well. Well, in today's session, we are going to deal with the reading C, which is titled as Can't Climb Trees Anymore. In our previous session, we have already done with reading A and reading B. Reading A is titled as What is Man Without the Beast? And the reading B is titled as The River. And in today's session, we are going to begin with reading C, which is titled as Can't Climb Trees Anymore. Before we get into the actual part of our lesson, let's know a little bit about the author. The author of Can't Climb Trees Anymore is Ruskin Bond. He was born in Kausali, Himachal Pradesh in 1934. He wrote a number of short stories, essays, novels, and many books for children. The Room on the Roof was his first novel, written when he was just 17. It received the John Llewellyn Rhymes Memorial Prize in 1957. In 1992, he received the Sahitya Akademi Award for his short story collection Our Trees Still Grow in Tehra, given by the Sahitya Akademi, India's National Academy of Literature. He was awarded the Padma Shri in 1999 for contribution to children's literature. Well, students, when we shift or when we move to other city and settle ourselves in a new house, we are reminded about the old house, won't you? So this lesson is all about the narrator remembering his old house. Fine? He stood on the grass verge by the side of the road and looked over the garden wall at the old house. It hadn't changed much. The old house, built with a solid block of granite, wasn't altered at all, but there was a new outhouse and there were fewer trees. So, well, who is he here? Here he is referring to the narrator. Fine. So, the narrator, he stood on the grass verge. What is meant by verge? The meaning of verge is an edge or border. So, where did he stand? He stood on the verge of the grass by the side of the road. He stood side of the road and looked over the garden wall at the old house. So where is the narrator now? He is just standing in front of his old house and just looking at the old house. Fine. It hadn't changed much. The old house, built with the solid blocks of granite, wasn't altered at all. You know what is meant by altered? Changed. Fine. So the narrator found not much changes of his old house. It remained the same, but there was a new outhouse and there were fewer trees. What is meant by outhouse? A building such as a shed or a barn that is built on to or in the grounds of a house. It's a shed. In simple terms, it is a shed. Now, what is meant by looked over? To examine something, usually quickly. Fine? So where is the narrator? The narrator is standing just right in front of his old house, looking at the house, finding not much changes happening to his old house, but he only found there was a new outhouse. Fine. He was glad to see that the jackfruit tree still stood at the side of the building, casting its shade on the wall. He remembered his grandmother saying, "A blessing rests on the house where the shadow of a tree falls." So the narrator was very happy. The meaning of glad is, feeling happy. He was so happy to see the jackfruit was still there. The jackfruit tree was still there at the side of the building, casting its shade. Okay, showing or giving its shade on the wall. And he remembered his grandmother saying, "A blessing rests on the house where the shadow of a tree falls." It's clear, right? And so the present owners must also be receiving the tree's blessings. At the spot where he stood, there had once been a turnstile, and as a boy he would swing on it, going round and round until he was quite dizzy. So where is the narrator standing? He was just standing side of the road, right? So he stood there admiring his old house. And he remembers his grandmother's words. Now, what did his grandmother say? A blessing rests upon the house where the shadow of a tree falls, right? She says exactly, a blessing rests on the house where the shadow of a tree falls. And the narrator also thinks that, even the present owners also must be receiving the tree's blessings. And at the spot where the narrator was standing, once there was a turnstile. Now, what is meant by turnstile? It is a mechanical gate consisting of revolving horizontal arms fixed to a vertical post, allowing only one person at a time to pass through. It's a gate, okay, through which only a single person can move. So the narrator gets back to his nostalgic feeling as a boy. He would swing on it. What is meant by it? It is a gate, a turnstile. He would stand on it, or he would swing through turnstile, and he would go round and round until he gets quite dizzy. Dizzy is having a sensation of spinning around and losing one's balance as if he is going to fall. Fine. Now the turnstile had gone, the opening walled up. Tall hollyhocks grew on the other side of the wall. What are you looking at? It was a disembodied voice at first. So as the narrator stood side of the road, and he was in his nostalgic feeling, and he remembers the turnstile, and no more the turnstile had been present there because it has been removed, and the opening was walled up. It was closed. What is meant by walled up? It is to close off by filling it with the stones or bricks. Walled up is to close, either with the bricks or stones. So there is no turnstile, and the place was closed with the walled up, or bricks. The place was walled up. Tall hollyhocks. Hollyhocks are a tall garden plant with a large showy flowers. So there were tall hollyhocks grew on the other side of the wall. Suddenly there was a strange voice. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? And the voice was disembodied. What is meant by disembodied? Lacking any obvious physical source. Which means there was only sound, there was only noise. Suddenly the narrator heard, what are you looking at? Fine. Moments later, a girl stood framed between dark red hollyhocks, staring at the man. She was only 12 or 13, slim and dark, with lively eyes and long black hair. Now you understand, previously the narrator could hear only a disembodied voice, but moments later they stood framed between dark red hollyhocks, staring at the man. A girl stood. Okay, where was she standing? She was standing between the dark red hollyhocks, and she was staring at the man. And the girl was only 12 or 13 years of old, and she was slim and dark with lively eyes and long black hair. Now what does it mean, lively eyes? Full of life and vigor. I'm looking at the house, he said. Why? Do you want to buy it? Is it your house? It's my father's. And what does your father do? He is only a colonel. Only a colonel? Well, he should have been a brigadier by now. The man burst out laughing. So the moments later, the narrator found a girl standing between the hollyhocks, right? And the girl was, she was only 12 or 13 years of old, and she was slim and dark with lively eyes. And the man says that he was looking at the house. And the girl asks, "Do you want to buy it?" The girl inquires the narrator if he was going to buy the house. And the narrator asks if it was her house. Fine. And the girl says it is her father's. The narrator asks whether it was her house, and the girl says that the house belongs to her father. And the narrator asks what her father is. Okay, what does her father do? And the girl replies that he was a colonel. He was a colonel. Now, what is meant by colonel? Colonel is, high rank in the army. Okay, high rank in the army. Someone who has this high rank in army. Fine. And when the girl says that he is only a colonel, and the narrator asks, only a colonel? He just says he is just only colonel, and the girl says that he should have become a brigadier by now. Now, what is meant by a brigadier? A rank of officer in the British Army, above colonel and below major general, which means brigadier is a little more than colonel. Fine. So the man burst out laughing when he heard from the girl that he should have become, or he should have been a brigadier by now. Clear? "It's not funny," she said. "Even mummy says he should have been a brigadier." It was on the tip of his tongue to make a witty remark. Perhaps that's why he is still a colonel, but he did not want to give offense. So when the man burst out in laughing, the girl says it is not a funny thing. It's not funny. And the girl says, she confirms that even her mother used to say that her husband, or the girl's father, would have become a brigadier. So when the narrator heard from the girl, it was on his tip of his tongue. It was on the tip of his tongue to make a statement like, perhaps that's why he is still a colonel. But he did not want to give offense. He did not want to hurt the girl. Offense is an illegal act. Here it is actually, hurting the girl. He did not want to hurt the girl. Clear? They stood on either side of the wall, appraising each other. "Well," she said finally, "if you don't want to buy the house, what are you looking at?" So the girl and the man were actually on the either side of the wall. Okay, the wall was between the girl and the man. Now, what is meant by appraising each other? Here, appraising is to examine someone or something in order to judge their qualities, success, or needs. So the narrator and the girl were standing on either side of the wall, and they were examining or looking at each other. And finally the girl says, finally she says whether the man, the narrator, was interested to buy the house or he wanted to buy the house. Then she says, if you don't want to buy the house, then what are you looking at? Clear? So when the narrator was looking at the house, the girl asks, right, why he was looking at. And finally the girl says, if the narrator was not going to buy the house, and why he was looking at the house. She questions him. Clear? I used to live here once, 25 years ago, as a boy, as a young man, and then my grandmother died and we sold the house and went away. So when the girl asks, if you don't want to buy the house, then why are, what are you looking at? And the man says that, he used to live in that house once upon a time. And it was like, it was almost like 25 years ago as a boy. And now he is no more a boy, right? He is a young man. And when his grandmother died, they sold the house and went away. Clear? She was silent for a while, taking in this information. Then she said, and you would like to buy it back now? But you don't have the money. He did not look very prosperous. No, I wasn't thinking of buying it back. Wanted to see it again, that's all. How long have you lived in it? Only 3 years. She smiled. She had been eating a melon and there was still juice in the corners of her mouth. So the girl was silent after listening to the narrator. What did the narrator say? The narrator says that 25 years back he had lived in that particular house, and when his grandmother died, they shifted from there. They sold the house and they went away from there. So the girl was silent for a while, taking this information, and she said to the man, or she asked the man if he would like to buy it back, whether he was interested to buy it back the house. And the girl herself says, but you don't have the money, because the girl observes that the man was not so prosperous looking. Now what is meant by prosperous looking? Wealthy, rich, affluent, well off. So the girl, she concludes that the man was not that prosperous, he was not wealthy, he was not rich enough that he could buy the house back. And the man says that he was not thinking of buying the house and he just wanted to see it again. Clear? And the girl asks the man how long he had been living in that house, and the man says just only 3 years. And the girl was actually eating a melon and there was still juice in the corners of her mouth. I believe you have understood. Fine? Would you like to come in and look more closely? Wouldn't your parents mind? They have gone to the club. They won't mind. I am allowed to bring my friends home, even elderly friends like me. How old are you? Oh, just middle-aged but feeling young today. So the girl invites the man and asks whether he was interested to come in and look more closely his old house. And the man, the narrator, asks if her parents won't mind if he gets inside, house or inside the campus. And the girl says that they have gone to the club, and she also says that they won't mind because she is allowed to bring her friends home. And the narrator asks, even elderly friends like me? And the girl asks how old the narrator was, and the narrator says that he was just middle-aged, and that he says that he was feeling young that day. Clear? And to prove it, he decided he would climb over the wall instead of going round to the gate. He got up on the wall all right, but had to rest there, breathing heavily. So the narrator says that he was just a middle-aged, and he says that he was young that day. So in order to show that he was young, to prove that he was young, he decides to climb over the wall instead of going through the gate. So he got up on the wall all right, but he had to rest there, breathing heavily, panting for breath, which means he was tired, right? Middle-aged man on the flying trapeze. He muttered to himself. I'll help you, she said, and gave him her hand. He slithered down into the flower bed, shattering the stem of a hollyhock. It's clear, right? The narrator says, to prove that he was young, he tries to climb over the wall. Finally, he climbs over the wall and he sits on the wall, breathing heavily. And what do you understand by trapeze? Trapeze is, a swing used by circus acrobats. And finally, what happened? The girl says that she would help him, and she gives him hand, but the man slithered down. He slithered down from the wall. He fell on the flower bed, shattering the stem of a hollyhock. You understand what is hollyhock? It's a tall garden plant with a large showy flower. So he fell on the hollyhock plant, shattering, spreading all the stems all over. Clear? As they walked across the grass, he spotted a stone bench under a mango tree. It was the bench on which his grandmother used to rest when she was tired of pruning rose bushes and bougainvillea. It's clear, right? So the man finally gets inside, and both of them, the girl and the narrator, were walking across the grass. And the narrator spotted a stone bench which was under a mango tree, and he remembers that it was the bench on which his grandmother used to sit after feeling tired of pruning rose bushes and bougainvilleas. Okay, now what is meant by pruning? Pruning is trimming. We cut, okay, a trim by cutting away dead or overgrown branches or stem. Finally, it's like, especially to encourage growth. It's a trimming. In simple words, it's trimming a bush or a tree or a shrub. Let's just sit here, he said. I don't want to go inside. She sat beside him on the bench. It was March and the mango tree was in blossom. A sweet, rather heavy fragrance drenched the garden. So finally the narrator says to the girl, let's sit here. And he says that he did not want to go inside. So the girl sits beside the narrator on the bench. And it was March and the mango tree was in blossom. What is meant by blossom? A flower or a mass of flowers, especially on a tree or bush. Fine. Now what is meant by drench? Drench is, wet thoroughly or soak. Fragrance is a pleasant, sweet smell. So finally, both the girl and the narrator are sitting on the bench, and it was, the month of March, and the mango tree was in full blossom, and there was a sweet, scent, fragrance all over the garden. Clear, right? They were silent for some time. The man closed his eyes and remembered other times. The music of a piano, the chiming of a grandfather clock, the constant twitter of budgerigards on the veranda, his grandfather cracking up the old car. So the narrator and the girl were actually sitting on the bench, and both of them were silent for some time. And the man suddenly closes his eyes and he remembers other times. His nostalgic feeling comes. He remembers the music of a piano and the chiming of a grandfather clock and the constant twitter of budgerigards on the veranda. Now, budgerigards is, small Australian parakeet which is green with a yellow head in the wild, but has been bred in variety of colors as a pet. It's a pet bird. Okay, so he remembers all these things as he sits with the girl on the stone bench, and he also remembers his grandfather cracking up the old car. I used to climb the jackfruit tree, he said, opening his eyes. I didn't like the jackfruit tree though. Do you? It's all right in pickles. I suppose so. The tree was easy to climb. I spent a lot of time in it. Do you want to climb it again? My parents won't mind. So the narrator, closing his eyes, he remembers, the twittering of the bird and his grandfather cracking up the car and so on. And he opens his eyes and he says to the girl that he used to climb the jackfruit tree even though he did not like the jackfruit tree. And the narrator asks the girl if she liked jackfruit tree. And the girl says it's all right in pickles. It means, in a troublesome or difficult situation, I suppose. And the man says that, the tree was easy to climb. So he spent lot of time climbing over the tree and remaining on the tree, spending time on the tree. So the girl asks the narrator if he was willing to climb it again, and she also says that her parents won't mind if the narrator climbs the tree. Clear? No, not after climbing the garden wall. Let's just sit here for a few minutes and talk. I mentioned the jackfruit tree because it was my favorite place. Do you see that thick branch stretching out over the roof? Halfway along it, there's a small hollow in which I used to keep some of my treasures. So, when the girl asks if the narrator was interested to climb the tree and her parents' own mind, and the narrator says that no, he says no, that he was not interested, or he doesn't show any interest in climbing the tree after climbing the garden wall. And he says to the girl, let's sit and talk. Let's sit few minutes and talk. Where are they sitting? They are sitting on the stone bench which is under a mango tree. And the narrator says he mentions the jackfruit tree because it was his favorite place. Jackfruit tree was his favorite place. And the narrator also points out and shows to the girl, do you see that thick branch stretching out? What is the meaning of stretching out? To extend something outward. To extend something outward. Do you see that thick branch stretching out over the roof? Halfway along it there is a small hollow. You know what is meant by hollow? In simple terms, it is a hole. Okay, a hole in a tree. So the narrator points out and says, there is a small hollow in which he used to keep some of his treasures. Where is the hollow? It is in the tree. Okay, it is in the tree. And he used to keep some of his treasure. Now what is meant by treasure? It is of great wealth or value. Clear? What kind of treasures? Oh, nothing very valuable. Marbles I had won. A book I wasn't supposed to read, a few old coins I had collected. Things came and went. I was a bit of a crow, collecting bright things and putting them away. So when the narrator says that he used to keep, the great treasures in the hollow, and the girl asks, what kind of treasure? And the man says it is of not great value or very valuable, but they are some marbles. And he also says a book that he was not supposed to read. He wasn't supposed to read, and few old coins he had collected. And he says he was like a crow. A crow, the nature of the crow is that it picks up all the bright things. It picks up all bright things. So the narrator says he was like a crow picking up all the bright things and putting them away. So where was he putting them? He was storing them in the hollow. Those were his treasures. Fine. That was my grandfather's iron cross. Well, not my grandfather's exactly, because he was British and the iron cross was a general decoration awarded for bravery during the war, the First World War, when my grandfather fought in France. He got it from a German soldier. So whose iron cross was that? It was actually his grandfather. Whose grandfather? It is narrator's grandfather. And he also says exactly it is not his grandfather's, because he was a British and the Iron Cross was a German decoration awarded for bravery during the First World War. So it was awarded to him during the First World War by the German soldier. Clear? So he got it from the German soldier when he fought in France. Dead or alive? I beg your pardon. Oh, you mean the German? I never asked. Dead, I suppose, or perhaps he was a prisoner. I never asked grandfather. Isn't that strange? So when the narrator says that his grandfather got the Iron Cross from the German, the girl asks whether he was dead or alive. And she says, I beg your pardon. Now, what does it mean, I beg your pardon? It is, I request your forgiveness, feeling sorry. Fine? I beg your pardon is, I request your forgiveness. And the narrator confirms whether she was asking about the German. And the narrator says that he never asked, and he says that he supposes that he was dead and he never asked his grandfather about that particular German soldier who gave him the iron cross. And the iron cross, do you still have it? No, he said, looking her in the eyes. I left it in the jackfruit tree. You left it in the jackfruit tree? Yes, I was so excited at the time. Packing and saying goodbye to people and thinking about the ship I was going to sail on that, I simply forgot all about it. So the girl inquires about the iron cross if the narrator was still having it. And the narrator says that, looking into the eyes of the girl, he says that he left the iron cross in the jackfruit tree. You remember, he keeps all his valuables in the hollow of the jackfruit tree. So the narrator says he left the iron cross in the jackfruit tree because he says that he was so excited because he was engaged in packing things and saying goodbye to people, and he was very much immersed thinking about the ship he was going to sail. Sail is to travel on water in a ship. He was thinking about the ship that he was going to sail. So he simply forgot about all the valuables that he left in the hollow of the tree, including iron cross. She was silent, considering, her finger on her lips, her gaze fixed on the jackfruit tree. Then quietly she said, "It may still be there, in the hollow in the branch." "Yes," he said, "it's 25 years, but it may still be there, unless someone else found it. Would you like to go and look?" So the girl, when she heard from the narrator that the narrator left that iron cross in the hollow of the branch, she keeps her finger on her lips, okay, and she gazes at the jackfruit tree, and she quietly says to the, says to the narrator that still the iron cross may be there in the jackfruit tree, in the hollow of the branch. And the narrator says it is almost 25 years, and he says that it might be there unless if someone had, someone else had found it and taken it. And the girl asks if the narrator was ready, or if he was willing to go and look for the iron cross. "I can't climb trees anymore. If you can't, I will go and see. You just sit here and wait for me." She sprang up and ran across the grass, swift and sweet of limb. Soon she was in the jackfruit tree, crawling along the projecting branch. So when she asked the narrator if he was willing to go and look for the iron cross, the narrator says that he can no more climb the trees. And the girl says if he was not able, she was ready to go and look for the iron cross. So she says to the narrator to sit there and wait for her. Fine. She sprang up and ran across the grass. Now what is meant by sprang up? To rise, leap, or move suddenly and swiftly. So she ran towards a jackfruit tree, swift and sweet of limbs. Now what is meant by swift and sweet of limbs? Do something very dangerous that may cause them to die, or be seriously injured. Here it may cause a danger or injure to her, because she is going to climb the trees, right? And she is a very tender girl. She is of 13 or 14 years of old. So soon she was in the jackfruit tree, crawling along the projecting branch. Crawling is to move slowly or with a difficulty, especially with your body stretched out along the ground or on the hands and knees, crawling. So finally she climbed the jackfruit tree, and she was found on the jackfruit tree. A warm wind brought little eddies of dust along the road. Summer was in the air. "I found it," she cried. "I found something." And now, barefoot, she ran breathlessly towards him, in her outstretched hand a rusty old medal. He took it from her hand and turned it over on his palm. "Isn't the iron cross?" she asked eagerly. So there was a warm wind that brought all little eddies. Now what is eddies? Eddies is, move in a circular way. The wind that moves in circular, have you seen? So the dust was circling in eddies. It was moving in circle way. And summer was in the air, and suddenly the girl cried out that she found it. She screamed, she shouted that she found something, and she ran barefoot. Now, what is meant by barefoot? Wearing nothing on the feet, without slippers. She ran towards the narrator. In her outstretched hand, a rusty old medal. She was having in her hand a rusty old medal. Now, what is meant by outstretched hand or outstretched, extended or stretched out? Extended or stretched out. Now, what is meant by breathlessly? In a way that involves gasping for breath, typically due to exertion. Now, the girl, when she found the iron cross, she ran towards the narrator, right? So she was panting for breath. She runs breathlessly towards the narrator. With the outstretched hand, she gives or shows a rusted old medal to him. So the narrator took it from her and turned it over on his palm. He kept it on his palm, and the narrator was just looking at the rusty old medal. And the girl asked if it was the iron cross that he left in the hollow of the branch. Yes, he said, this is it. Now I know why you came. You wanted to see if it was still in the tree. You may be right. I'm not really sure why I came. But you can keep the cross. You found it after all. No, you keep it. It's yours. So the girl inquires or confirms the narrator if the iron cross was the one he left 25 years back. And the narrator says, yes, it was the iron cross that he left in the hollow of the branch. And the girl says that, that she says it was the only reason the narrator came to the old house, which means he wanted to see if the iron cross was there in the hollow of the branch or not. And the narrator says that may not be right, and he was not very sure why he came. And the narrator asks the girl to keep the iron cross with her, but the girl says, it is yours, so please keep it with you. She doesn't accept from the narrator. But it could have remained in the tree for another 25 years if you hadn't climbed up to look for it. But if you hadn't come back again, on the right day, at the right time, and with the right person, he said, getting up and placing the medal in her hands. It wasn't the cross I came for, it was my youth. She didn't understand that, but she walked with him to the gate and stood there gazing after him as he walked away. So the narrator says if the girl had not climbed the wall to look for it, the medal would have remained another 25 years in the hollow of the branch. So the narrator, placing the medal in the hand of the girl, he gets up and he starts walking or to move away from the house. And the girl also accompanies the man to the gate and stands there gazing after him as he was walking away. Where the road turned, he looked back and waved to her. Then he quickened his steps and moved briskly toward the bus stop. There was sprightliness in his step, and something cried aloud in his heart. So the man started moving away from the house, and the girl was just gazing at the man. And when the road turned, he looked back and he waved at the girl. The meaning of wave is move hand to say hello or goodbye. Here in this case saying goodbye. The man said goodbye to the girl, and then he quickened his steps. Quickened is make or become faster or quicker. He made his steps faster and moved briskly toward the bus stop. There was sprightliness in his step, and something cried aloud in his heart. Now, what is meant by sprightliness? The quality or state of being sprightly, liveliness, life. Clear? Dark dancing eyes, melon sweet lips, lissom limbs. The mango scented summer breeze made the blood course in his veins, and he forgot for a moment that he couldn't climb trees anymore. Now, what was that? Something was, going on in his heart, in the heart of the narrator. It was a dancing eyes, melon sweet lips, and lissom limbs. Lissom limbs, the meaning of lissom is slim and graceful. How were the limbs? The limbs were, slim and graceful. The mango scented summer breeze made the blood course in his veins, and he forgot for a moment that he couldn't climb trees anymore. So, how was the breeze? It was scented with the mango, and it made the blood course in his veins. Now, what is meant by course? Course is, it's a flow of liquid. Flow of liquid. That's where he has forgotten that he couldn't climb trees anymore. Well, students, I believe you have understood today's session. See you in the next session. Bye.